It started one rainy Thursday night. I was home alone. My roommates were out, and I was halfway through a movie when I heard a soft knock at the front door. Not a normal knock either. It was slow, deliberate. At first, I thought maybe a delivery driver had the wrong house. I hadn't ordered anything, but maybe one of my roommates did. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. Just the reflection of my porch light bouncing off the wet concrete. I figured I imagined it, so I went back to the couch. But maybe 10 minutes later I heard the sound again, not from the door this time, from outside, near the driveway. I muted the TV and crept over to the window. That's when I saw him. A man standing in the rain at the edge of my driveway facing the house. He wasn't moving, just standing there like a statue. He had on a gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, soaked through. I couldn't see his face. I froze. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he needed help. But something about the way he was just standing there made my stomach twist. After maybe a minute, I turned off the lights, hoping he'd think nobody was home. When I peeked back through the blinds, he was closer. Now halfway up the driveway. I could feel my pulse in my neck. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering what was happening. The operator told me to stay on the line and lock the doors. I ran to check the back door, and as I passed the kitchen window, there he was. Standing at the glass, looking straight in. He tilted his head slightly, almost curious. I screamed and ran to my room, locked the door, and stayed on the phone with 911 until I saw red and blue lights flashing through the curtains. When the cops came, the man was gone. They found wet footprints all over the porch, and one muddy handprint on the window. But here's the part that chills me even now. They pulled footage from my neighbor's doorbell camera. The man had been standing across the street for nearly 2 hours before I noticed him. Just watching the house. And they never found him. When I moved to a new city for work, I needed a roommate fast. I found an ad on Craigslist, $500 a month for a big room in a decent neighborhood. The guy's name was Ethan. He seemed normal at first. Clean, quiet, mid-20s, worked construction. We met at a coffee shop, signed a basic lease, and I moved in the following week. At first, everything was fine. But about a month in, weird things started happening. Little stuff. My food missing. Lights turning on after I went to bed. My bathroom door slightly open when I knew I'd closed it. I brushed it off, until one night I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door clicking shut. It was dark, but I swear I saw a shadow move away from the door. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't hear anything else. I listened for footsteps. Nothing. The next morning, I asked Ethan if he'd come into my room. He laughed it off, said maybe I was dreaming. But that night, I decided to set up an old webcam on my desk, pointed at the door. The next morning, I checked the footage. Around 2:13 a.m., my door creaked open. Ethan stepped inside. He stood at the foot of my bed. For nearly 6 minutes. He didn't move, didn't touch anything, just watched me sleep. Then he turned to the camera, looked directly into it, smiled, and whispered something I couldn't hear. I packed my stuff and left while he was at work. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the police. They'd found my old roommate's name in an investigation. Turns out Ethan wasn't his real name. He'd been using fake identities to move into people's homes, and in one of his old apartments, the last roommate went missing. My brother and I love hiking. We usually stick to marked trails, but last October, we decided to explore an older, less used route deep in the woods near our hometown. The trail was narrow and overgrown, but we'd heard there was an abandoned ranger station at the top. Supposedly haunted, though we laughed that off. About an hour in, the trees started to look unfamiliar. No more trail markers. My phone lost service. We kept walking, hoping to spot the station or a clearing. That's when we heard it. A faint whistle. It came from somewhere up ahead. My brother shouted, thinking it might be another hiker, but nobody answered. The whistling came again. 3 short notes, like a tune. It didn't sound random. It sounded intentional. We stopped, and then, from behind us, the same whistle. This time closer. We turned around, but the woods were empty. My brother pulled out his flashlight, even though it was still daytime. That's when he noticed something hanging from a branch. A piece of cloth, torn, faded, and red. We started heading back fast, but it felt like the woods had changed. We kept passing the same tree. I swear we walked in circles. Then we saw movement between the trees. A man, tall, wearing a dirty flannel, watching us. He wasn't walking, just standing perfectly still. We shouted to him, asked if he knew the way back, but he didn't respond. He lifted his hand and whistled the same 3 notes. That's when we ran. We didn't stop until we broke through to a dirt road, completely out of breath. When we looked back, no one was there. We told the park ranger what happened, and he looked at us like he'd heard it before. He said, "You boys stay away from that ridge. We've had people go missing up there since the 90s. Locals say if you hear the whistle, it means he's already seen you." We never went back, and sometimes, when I'm walking home late at night, I swear I still hear those 3 notes. When I was in college, I rented a cheap basement apartment near campus. It wasn't great. 1 small window, thin walls, and a weird smell I could never get rid of, but it was all I could afford. The landlord was an older guy named Mr. Ritchie. Quiet, polite, but something about him always made me uneasy. He lived upstairs with his wife, and they mostly kept to themselves. The first week was fine, but I started noticing strange things, like waking up to find my front door unlocked even though I always double-checked it before bed. Then there were the noises. Soft footsteps in the hallway at 2 or 3 a.m. Not upstairs, in the basement. At first I thought maybe it was pipes creaking, but then I heard whispering. Low, muffled, like someone was talking just outside my door. I called up to the landlord one morning, asked if maybe a repairman had been down there overnight. He just smiled and said, "You must be hearing the house settle. Old places do that." The next night, I set up my phone to record audio while I slept. When I played it back in the morning, I almost threw up. You can clearly hear the door handle turning. Slow, careful, then the door opening, footsteps, breathing, and then a man's voice whispering, "He's asleep." I ran upstairs with the recording to confront Mr. Ritchie. His wife answered the door, confused. She said her husband was at work. When he came home later that day, I showed him the audio. His face went pale. He told me the truth. I wasn't the only tenant living down there. Before I moved in, they'd rented the basement to another man. He was supposed to leave months ago, but after a fight with the landlord, he disappeared without a trace. The police never found him. Mr. Ritchie thought he'd left town. But a week later, after I moved out, the new tenant called the cops. They found a hidden crawl space behind the storage wall, and inside it a small sleeping area, food wrappers, and a single mattress. Whoever had been living there had never left. "If you made it this far, you're braver than most," But don't get too comfortable, because stories like these don't just happen to other people. They happen to people who think it could never happen to them. Lock your doors, check your windows, and if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. I'll see you in the next story.